On April 14, 2023, at 10:22 in the morning, Ethan Marsh descended past 1,140 feet below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, 89 miles due west of Key West, Florida. The water at that depth exists in complete darkness. No sunlight penetrates beyond 600 feet. At 1,140 feet, the pressure reaches roughly 500 pounds per square inch. The temperature hovers at 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Ethan was breathing a custom trimix blend, 10% oxygen, 50% helium, 40% nitrogen, through a closed-circuit rebreather system that recycled his exhaled gas and cost more than most people's cars. He was a technical dive instructor. Had been for 11 years. Before that, he spent 6 years as a commercial saturation diver working oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. 837 logged dives in his certification record. Master Diver rating from PADI, Full Cave Certification, Trimix Instructor Certification. His students called him careful to the point of paranoid. His late wife used to call him the only adrenaline junkie with a spreadsheet addiction. She died 2 years earlier. Aneurysm. No warning. 36 years old. After that, Ethan spent more time underwater than on land. The silence helped. This particular dive was a solo deep survey. He was mapping an unexplored section of the Florida escarpment, where the continental shelf drops away into the abyssal plain. His vessel, a 32-foot dive boat called the Sarah J., was anchored above him, unmanned except for the automated positioning system. The descent had taken 48 minutes following proper protocols. His dive computer showed 18 minutes of bottom time remaining before he would need to begin the long ascent. 6 hours of staged decompression stops awaited him on the way back up. Nitrogen and helium dissolve into body tissues under pressure. Ascend too quickly, and the gases form bubbles in the bloodstream. Divers call it the bends. It can kill you or leave you paralyzed. So you ascend slowly. Very slowly. His sonar had detected an anomaly 3 days earlier during a preliminary survey pass. A geometric formation that didn't match natural rock patterns. He expected to find maybe an old shipwreck, possibly debris from a cargo vessel, something explainable. What his helmet-mounted lights revealed at 10:22 that morning was none of those things. 13 statues stood in a perfect circle. Each statue rose between 40 and 50 feet from the seafloor, carved from what appeared to be limestone, weathered smooth by centuries or millennia of deep-water currents. They depicted human-like figures in robes, arms raised, hands pointing outward. The circle they formed measured almost exactly 200 feet in diameter. Ethan's first coherent thought, captured on his helmet camera, was a whispered, "What the hell?" He approached the nearest statue slowly, controlling his buoyancy with precise adjustments to his wing inflator. The limestone showed signs of biological colonization. Barnacles, tube worms, deep-water corals. But there was something else. Patches of what looked like coralline algae, a photosynthetic organism that requires sunlight. At 1,140 feet below the surface, in absolute darkness, coralline algae cannot exist. It violates basic biology. Yet there it was, covering approximately 15 to 20% of each statue's surface. Ethan spent the next 14 minutes documenting the formation. His helmet camera recorded everything. He measured the diameter of the circle using a laser rangefinder, 203 feet. He photographed the details of each statue's weathering patterns, and then he did something that should have been impossible at that depth. He began calculating the precise angles at which each statue's hands were pointing. Nitrogen narcosis sets in around 100 feet for most divers. By 300 feet, cognitive function becomes severely impaired. The phenomenon is often compared to being drunk. Complex mathematics becomes difficult. Judgment suffers. At 1,140 feet, even with a trimix gas blend that reduces narcosis, clear logical thinking should be nearly impossible. Yet the helmet camera footage shows Ethan pulling a waterproof notebook from his equipment harness and recording angle measurements with apparent perfect clarity. Statue 1, 42 degrees northeast. Statue 2, 78 degrees east-northeast. Statue 3, 112 degrees east-southeast. He documented all 13 angles in precise detail. His dive computer alarm sounded at 10:46. Bottom time expired. He began his ascent, following the pre-programmed decompression schedule. First stop at 900 feet for 4 minutes, then 800 feet for 6 minutes. The protocol continued upward in carefully timed stages. At 600 feet, he switched to a different gas mix from one of the stage cylinders he'd clipped to the descent line earlier. The entire ascent would take 5 hours and 52 minutes. When he finally surfaced at 4:38 that afternoon, a United States Navy research vessel was anchored 300 yards from the Sarah J. Ethan had never transmitted his discovery by radio. His communication system had been set to receive only during the dive. Standard protocol for solo operations. The Navy ship was already there, waiting. A man in a Navy uniform was already climbing aboard the Sarah J. before Ethan had finished removing his rebreather harness. Commander Walsh, according to the name tape on his chest. He was maybe 50 years old, fit, with the kind of weathered face that comes from decades of sea duty. 2 other personnel remained on the deck of the Navy vessel. Walsh smiled, the professional smile of someone delivering bad news, and asked if Ethan had a moment to discuss his dive. It wasn't really a question. They talked for 40 minutes in the cramped cabin of the Sarah J. Walsh was polite, even friendly. He explained that the area Ethan had surveyed fell within a restricted maritime archaeological zone. Recent designation, apparently. Very recent, since it hadn't appeared on any charts when Ethan filed his dive plan 3 days earlier. Walsh said they would need to confiscate Ethan's GPS unit for verification purposes, just standard procedure, nothing personal. He could keep the helmet camera and all other equipment. When Ethan asked why the Navy had been waiting for him before he even surfaced, Walsh said they had been conducting routine sonar mapping in the area and happened to notice his vessel. The explanation was smooth, rehearsed, and completely implausible given that the Sarah J was designed to minimize sonar signature and Ethan hadn't transmitted any position data. Ethan handed over the GPS unit without argument. He had uploaded all his dive data to encrypted cloud storage during his decompression stops using a satellite phone that stayed in a waterproof case clipped to his harness. The GPS unit Walsh confiscated contained nothing that wasn't already backed up remotely. Walsh seemed satisfied. He left his card with a direct phone number, mentioned something about possible consultation fees if Ethan was willing to provide additional information about deepwater formations in the region, and departed within an hour of arriving. The Navy vessel was gone by sunset. 2 days later, Ethan sat in a coffee shop in Miami, across from Maya Chen. She was 34 years old, a computational oceanographer who specialized in bathymetric mapping and seafloor topology analysis. She worked for a private marine research firm that contracted with universities and occasionally government agencies. She had been one of his late wife Sarah's closest friends since graduate school. They had stayed in loose contact after Sarah's death, occasional messages on birthdays and holidays, the awkward maintenance of a friendship that existed primarily through someone who was gone. Maya looked at the printed satellite images and angle measurements spread across the table between their coffee cups. Her expression shifted from polite interest to confusion to something that might have been concern. She asked him 3 times if he was sure about the measurements. He showed her the helmet camera footage on his laptop, the segments where he had calculated and recorded each angle with apparent mathematical precision, despite being more than 1,000 feet underwater in conditions that should have made complex thinking nearly impossible. She agreed to help, though she hesitated. Her career depended on maintaining good relationships with federal research institutions. Getting involved with data that had attracted Navy attention was not a smart move professionally. But Sarah would have wanted to know what this meant, she said finally. Sarah had been obsessed with unexplained deep-water anomalies, the kind of structures that didn't fit conventional archaeological timelines. So Maya took the numbers home and spent 4 days running analysis. When she called Ethan back, her voice had a different quality. Flat, careful, like someone trying to control their reaction to information they didn't want to believe. She asked him to come to her apartment rather than meeting in public. She had converted the angles he measured into geographic coordinates, using the location of the statue's circle as a reference point, treating each statue's pointing direction as a vector. The 13 vectors, when extended outward and converted to longitude and latitude, pointed to 13 specific locations scattered across the Atlantic Ocean and surrounding land masses. The coordinates formed a 3-dimensional geometric pattern called a dodecahedron, a shape with 12 pentagonal faces plus 1 central point. The mathematical precision was extraordinary. Each coordinate was accurate to within 0.003 degrees. That level of precision would require advanced surveying equipment and astronomical knowledge. Maya pulled up a map on her laptop, showing all 13 points marked with red pins. 12 points formed the vertices of the dodecahedron structure. The 13th point, the center of the formation, was located in the Atlantic approximately 900 miles east of Florida. One of the points was in the middle of the Sahara Desert in Algeria, more than 400 miles from the nearest coastline. Another point was marked in the Puerto Rico Trench at a depth of approximately 28,000 feet, the deepest part of the Atlantic Ocean, far beyond the reach of any current human diving technology or even most remotely operated vehicles. Ethan stared at the map. Maya asked the question they were both thinking. What were they pointing at? The name Dr. Cole Harrison came from Maya. She had heard him speak at an oceanography conference in 2018, back when he was still publishing. He was a marine archaeologist who had spent 3 decades studying submerged structures in the Atlantic, mostly focusing on pre-colonial shipwrecks and coastal settlements lost to sea level rise. Then, in 2019, he abruptly retired from his position as a consultant with NOAA, moved to a small coastal town in Maine, and stopped publishing entirely. Maya said the rumor among colleagues was that he had found something during a survey expedition that the government didn't want publicized, but nobody knew the details. She managed to track down a phone number. Dr. Harrison didn't want to talk. He made that clear in the first 30 seconds of Ethan's call. He said he was retired, he didn't do consultations anymore, and he had nothing useful to contribute to whatever project Ethan was working on. But Ethan mentioned the 13 coordinates forming a dodecahedron pattern across the Atlantic, and there was a long pause on the line. Dr. Harrison asked for the specific coordinates. Ethan read them off. Another pause, longer this time. Then Dr. Harrison said he would meet them, but not over the phone and not at his home. There was a public library in Portland, Maine. He would be there the following Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon. Dr. Cole Harrison was 58 years old with gray hair and the careful, watchful manner of someone who had learned not to trust easily. He met them in a study room on the library's 2nd floor. a small windowless space that could be reserved for private use. He listened while Maya explained the statue formation, the angle measurements, the coordinate pattern. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, he opened a laptop that looked 10 years old and pulled up a folder containing scanned documents and photographs that had clearly been digitized from physical prints. The images were dated 1997 and 2004. "I've seen 2 of your 13 locations," Dr. Harrison said. His voice was quiet, deliberate. "I didn't connect them at the time because I didn't know there were others." The first location was near the Azores Islands off the coast of Portugal. In 1997, he had been part of an international research team conducting geological surveys of the mid-Atlantic ridge. They found a circular stone formation at a depth of 840 feet, similar in size and layout to what Ethan had discovered near Key West. The stones showed signs of deliberate placement and carving, though heavy weathering made details difficult to discern. The team collected samples for carbon dating and submitted a preliminary report. Within 6 months, the area was declared a restricted military research zone by the Portuguese government in cooperation with NATO. No further civilian research was permitted. The second location was in the area commonly known as the Bermuda Triangle. In 2004, Dr. Harrison was working with a NOAA team conducting deep sonar mapping. They detected a large geometric formation at approximately 1,600 feet depth. The sonar images showed clear artificial characteristics, straight edges, and right angles that don't occur in natural geology. The team prepared to send down a remotely operated vehicle for closer investigation. Before they could deploy the ROV, Dr. Harrison received a call from his supervisor at NOAA headquarters. The project was being terminated immediately due to budget constraints. The data was to be classified as preliminary and inconclusive. Dr. Harrison was told, politely but firmly, that continued interest in the formation would not be beneficial to his career. He had a wife, 2 kids in college, a mortgage. He stopped asking questions, but he kept copies of the data. Unauthorized copies. Technically, a violation of his security clearance, which is why he never spoke about them publicly. The carbon dating results from the Azores samples showed an age of approximately 12,500 years, placing the structures in the late Pleistocene epoch, thousands of years before any known advanced human civilization. The stone contained high concentrations of magnetite, a naturally magnetic mineral at levels roughly 33% compared to the typical 2% found in limestone. That detail hadn't seemed significant in 1997. Now, looking at a pattern of 13 similar formations arranged in perfect geometric precision across an entire ocean, it suggested something else entirely. Purpose, design, function. Dr. Harrison showed them one more document. A partially redacted internal NOAA memo from 2004 titled Project Zodiac, Preliminary Assessment of Geometric Anomalies in Atlantic Basin. See? The memo referenced ongoing investigation of multiple underwater structures exhibiting unusual magnetic properties and precise geometric alignment. Most of the content was blacked out. The visible portions mentioned coordination with Naval Oceanographic Office and recommended continued monitoring. The date on the memo was April 2004, 19 years before Ethan's dive. They were still examining the documents when Maya's phone buzzed with an email notification. She glanced at the screen, and her expression changed. The email was from someone named Iris Santos, an analyst with NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center specializing in geospatial data and magnetic field mapping. She had seen a post Ethan made on a technical diving forum 3 days earlier, asking if anyone had information about deep-water geometric formations in the Atlantic. She said she had access to satellite magnetometer data that might be relevant. She said there were anomalies, 13 of them, and the Navy had remotely operated vehicles positioned at 8 of the locations, not to study them, to monitor them. She didn't explain what the structures were supposedly doing that required monitoring. Iris Santos was 29 years old and had been working at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center for 6 years, analyzing satellite magnetometer data, the kind of work that involved staring at color-coded maps of the Earth's magnetic field, looking for patterns that might indicate anything from mineral deposits to tectonic activity. She agreed to meet them at a diner in Baltimore, 40 minutes from her office, and she looked nervous in a way that suggested she knew she was crossing lines that could end her career. She brought a tablet loaded with data files that she very clearly was not authorized to share outside of secure government facilities. The satellite data showed magnetic anomalies at all 13 coordinate points that Ethan and Maya had mapped. The anomalies weren't constant. They pulsed. Synchronized pulses occurring at regular intervals of approximately 29.5 days, matching the lunar cycle. The pulses had been recorded consistently in satellite data going back to 2012, when the current generation of magnetometers was deployed. Iris had gone back further using archived data from older satellites with less precise instruments. The pulses appeared in that data too, stretching back decades, possibly longer, but the historical data became too degraded to confirm. This wasn't ancient history. This was active, ongoing, happening right now in the present day. The second thing Iris showed them was harder to obtain. She had a friend, she wouldn't say who, with access to DARPA internal communications. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, the branch of the Department of Defense responsible for developing emerging technologies for military use. The friend had provided a leaked document, heavily redacted but still readable in key sections, titled Anomalous Magnetic Pulse Detection Network, Atlantic Formation. The document was dated June 2016 and classified as secret, with additional compartmented access restrictions. The visible portions described the 13 underwater formations as a coordinated detection system composed of limestone structures with anomalous magnetite concentrations averaging 33% compared to typical limestone magnetite content of approximately 2%. The high magnetite content allowed the stone to function as a natural electromagnetic conductor and amplifier. Maya asked the obvious question. A detection system for what? Iris scrolled to another section of the document. The formations appeared to be monitoring seismic or tectonic activity originating from deep beneath the oceanic crust, potentially from the upper mantle layer more than 20 miles below the seafloor. The document referenced a specific incident. On April 16, 2016, at 11:37 in the morning Eastern Time, Naval Oceanographic Office sensors detected a synchronized electromagnetic pulse from all 13 formation sites. The pulse lasted 14 seconds and registered as the strongest magnetic event recorded from the formations in modern monitoring history. 3 hours and 41 minutes later, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake struck near the coast of Ecuador, killing over 600 people and causing billions of dollars in damage. The pulse had preceded the earthquake, as if the network had detected the tectonic movement before it reached the surface, as if that was exactly what it was designed to do 12,500 years ago by people who shouldn't have possessed that capability? Dr. Harrison asked if the pulses followed any pattern beyond the lunar cycle timing. Iris pulled up a spectrographic analysis that she said took her 4 months to complete, using processing time she had borrowed from unrelated projects. The electromagnetic signature of each pulse wasn't random noise. It contained mathematical structure, repeating sequences that resembled binary code or some other form of information encoding. She couldn't decode it, didn't have the expertise for that kind of analysis, but the pattern was undeniable. The structures weren't just detecting seismic activity. They were communicating. Whether that communication was between the 13 sites or directed somewhere else, she didn't know. Things began happening quickly after that meeting. Maya's apartment in Miami was broken into 2 days later. Nothing was stolen, but her laptop had clearly been accessed, files opened and searched. Dr. Harrison received a phone call from a former colleague at NOAA who he hadn't spoken to in 5 years. The colleague said he had heard Dr. Harrison was asking questions about Atlantic formations again. He said it would be better for everyone involved if those questions stopped. He said Dr. Harrison knew how these things worked. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. Iris stopped responding to messages after a week. Her last email said she had been transferred to a different project at Goddard, something involving orbital debris tracking, and her security clearance for magnetic field data had been suspended pending a routine review. Ethan checked the magnetometer data one more time before Iris went silent. The formation near Key West, the one he had discovered and documented, had emitted an abnormal pulse 48 hours after his dive. The signature was different from the regular lunar cycle pulses, stronger and longer duration. Iris had found only one similar pulse in the historical record. 1755, 3 days before the Great Lisbon earthquake that killed more than 50,000 people and destroyed most of Portugal's capital city. Ethan's commercial diving license was suspended 6 weeks after his discovery. The stated reason was technical irregularities in his equipment maintenance logs, violations that would normally result in a warning letter for a first offense, not a suspension. His appeals were denied without explanation. Maya lost her access credentials to NOAA databases in late June, her employer citing a restructuring of data sharing agreements with federal agencies. Dr. Harrison maintained his silence and refused further communication. When Ethan tried calling, the number went to voicemail that was never returned. Iris Santos disappeared from NASA's public staff directory. A search of her name showed she had been reassigned to a classified orbital monitoring project with no public information available. Then, in August, Ethan received a package in the mail. No return address, postmarked from Washington, D.C. Inside was a manila folder containing photocopies of documents that appeared to be military records from World War II. The documents were labeled United States Navy Hydrographic Office, Special Survey Division, July 1943. They included hand-drawn maps of the Atlantic Ocean, with 13 locations marked and annotated as Magnetic Anomaly Sites, Origin Unknown, Strategic Monitoring Recommended. The coordinates matched, all 13 of them. The Navy had known about these formations for more than 80 years. They had been monitoring them since at least the 1940s, possibly longer. The documents included a memo signed by a rear admiral whose name was partially obscured by the photocopy quality. The visible portion of the memo recommended continued surveillance of anomalous sites pending determination of strategic value to ongoing Atlantic operations. There was no indication of who had sent the package or why. The current status of the 13 formations remains officially unexplained. As of 2024, the United States Navy maintains remotely operated vehicles at 8 of the 13 accessible locations, those in depths reachable by current ROV technology. Each site is surrounded by a maritime exclusion zone extending 10 nautical miles in all directions. The official justification listed on navigation charts is Environmentally Sensitive Research Area, No unauthorized vessels permitted. The Coast Guard enforces the zones. Commercial shipping routes have been quietly redirected to avoid the areas. Fishing vessels that stray too close receive radio warnings and are escorted away. Something changed in January of 2024. Minor earthquakes, magnitudes ranging from 3.5 to 4.2, were recorded within 50 miles of 4 separate formation sites over a 72-hour period. The United States Geological Survey classified the events as routine tectonic activity. But geologists noted the timing. 4 separate seismic events near 4 separate locations, hundreds of miles apart, all occurring within 3 days, was statistically improbable without a common triggering mechanism. The USGS data showed the earthquakes originated at unusual depths, between 30 and 40 miles below the seafloor, significantly deeper than typical oceanic seismic events. A commercial fisherman named Marcus Riley, working waters near the Florida Keys in March of 2024, reported seeing lights underwater approximately 15 miles west-southwest of Key West. He described them as pulsing flashes resembling lightning but occurring in regular rhythmic patterns, visible through roughly 600 feet of water for a period of 8 to 10 minutes before stopping. He reported the sighting to the Coast Guard. They told him it was likely bioluminescent marine life or equipment reflection from underwater research vessels. Marcus had been fishing those waters for 23 years. He said he knew what bioluminescence looked like, and he knew what research vessel lights looked like, and this was neither. He filed the report anyway. It was logged and archived with no follow-up investigation. The purpose of the formations appears relatively clear now. As much as anything 12,500 years old can be understood. They form a detection network designed to monitor seismic and tectonic activity originating from deep within the Earth's mantle, built by a civilization with technical knowledge and astronomical understanding that shouldn't have existed in the late Pleistocene epoch. The network is still functional, still monitoring, still transmitting data in the form of electromagnetic pulses that follow lunar cycles and respond to tectonic movement. But questions remain. Why is one of the 13 points located in the Sahara Desert 400 miles from the nearest ocean? Was that area underwater 12,000 years ago when the formations were built? What exactly is the network detecting? Just natural tectonic movement or something more specific that required such an elaborate warning system? Why have the pulse frequencies increased by more than 300% since 2016? And who sent Ethan the World War II documents showing that the military has known about this network for 8 decades without public disclosure? In May of 2024, all 13 formation sites emitted a synchronized electromagnetic pulse simultaneously for the first time in recorded modern history. The event lasted 22 seconds. The Navy has not commented. Global seismic monitoring stations detected no unusual tectonic activity on that date. But 3 weeks later, oceanographic surveys discovered a new tectonic fissure approximately 2,000 miles due east of Iceland, positioned almost exactly at the geometric center of the dodecahedron pattern formed by the 13 structures. The fissure hadn't existed in survey data from 2023. It extends roughly 12 miles along the seafloor at a depth of 9,000 feet, and according to sonar mapping conducted in August, it's growing, widening at an estimated rate of 14 inches per month. Whatever the ancient network was built to detect and warn about, it appears to be happening now.